I'm 58 years old, and for most of my life, I believe the quietest days were the best ones. I raised 3 children, kept a tidy home in a small town outside Denver, and spent almost 30 years married to a good, steady man named Paul. I never wanted excitement. I wanted Tuesday dinners and Sunday drives, and nothing more complicated than that. But last spring, something happened that I still haven't told anyone the full truth about. I never thought I was the kind of woman this could happen to. If you're watching this, please learn from what I didn't see coming. It had been a long day. Paul's company was hosting its annual regional meeting, the kind with name tags and stale coffee and too many PowerPoint slides. I'd gone along because Paul liked having me there, sitting quietly in the back, nodding along to things I didn't fully understand. By the time it ended, it was already dark outside, and Paul had been pulled into a side conversation with 2 men from corporate that I could tell wasn't going to end quickly. "You go ahead," he told me, squeezing my hand. Richard said he'd drive you home. It's practically on his way. Richard Hale was Paul's boss, a man I'd met maybe a dozen times over the years at company picnics and holiday parties. Early 60s, broad-shouldered, with the kind of calm, unhurried voice that made people lean in when he spoke. He'd always struck me as pleasant but distant, the sort of man who kept his real thoughts folded neatly behind a practiced smile. "Ready?" he asked, holding the passenger door open for me. The car smelled like leather and pine, clean in a way that felt almost deliberate. For the first few minutes, we talked about nothing. The length of the meeting, the terrible coffee, how fast the year was moving. Then he went quiet at a red light, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. "Can I ask you something honest?" he said, eyes still on the road. I told him he could. "Do you ever feel like people stopped seeing you a long time ago?" I didn't answer right away. The question sat in the car with us, heavier than anything either of us had said all evening. I looked out the window at the wet street lights blurring past, and for reasons I still can't fully explain, I nodded. He didn't say anything else the rest of the drive. When we pulled into my driveway, he put the car in park but didn't reach for the door. "You don't have to disappear just because someone loves you," he said quietly. I don't think people say that enough. I went inside without answering. I told myself it was nothing, just a strange, tired thing a tired man said at the end of a long night. I sat at my kitchen table for a long while before I even took my coat off, replaying the sentence, trying to decide if it had meant something or if I was simply tired enough to imagine that it had. I didn't sleep that night. Paul came home late, kissed my forehead, and was snoring within minutes. Same as always. I lay there in the dark, running Richard's words over and over. You don't have to disappear just because someone loves you. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even really about him. It was about a version of myself I hadn't thought about in years. The woman I'd been before I became somebody's wife, somebody's mother, somebody who remembered to defrost a chicken and sign the permission slips and keep the calendar straight for everyone but herself. The next morning I went through my routine the way I always did: coffee, the dog, the dishes from the night before. Everything felt slightly rearranged, like furniture had been moved an inch to the left, and I kept catching my hip on the corner of something that used to be out of the way. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text I didn't expect. Richard Hale. Hope that wasn't out of line the other night. Been a strange year. I stared at it for a long time before I answered. You didn't say anything wrong. I just wasn't expecting it. Neither was I. He wrote back. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The following week, Paul mentioned, almost in passing, that Richard was hosting a small dinner for a few of the senior staff and their spouses. He's been different since his wife passed, Paul said, buttering his toast. Trying to get out more, I think. You should come. I said it sounded nice. I didn't tell him my stomach had tightened the moment he said Richard's name. The dinner was low-key, soft jazz, good wine, the kind of tasteful house that belongs to a man who used to share it with someone and hasn't figured out what to do with the extra space. Bookshelves lined one wall, and there were framed photographs I made a point not to look at too closely. Richard greeted us both warmly at the door, his eyes lingering on me half a second longer than they needed to. I told myself I imagined it. Later, I stepped out onto his back patio for air. I heard the door slide open behind me. Thought, I might find you out here, he said. Needed a minute. I admitted He came to stand beside me, keeping a respectful distance, close enough that I could smell the same cedar and pine from the car. I meant what I said in the car, he said. I see someone who cares a lot and never lets anyone notice. I laughed it off, but my eyes were stinging in a way that embarrassed me. I should get back inside. He didn't stop me, but as I reached the door, I heard him say, almost too quiet to catch, "You deserve more than being invisible." I didn't sleep well again that night either, lying next to Paul, listening to the familiar rhythm of his breathing, wondering why a stranger's sentence had lodged itself somewhere I couldn't reach to remove it. A few days passed in a kind of fog. I went to the grocery store on a Wednesday afternoon, and there he was in the produce aisle, holding a bag of apples like it was the most natural coincidence in the world. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We ended up talking longer than two people running errands should, about nothing important, about the weather, about how he still bought groceries for two out of habit. Before I knew it, he'd asked if I wanted to get a coffee sometime. Just to talk, he said. No pressure. I should have said no. I said yes. We met at a quiet cafe near the lake 2 days later, while Paul thought I was at the farmer's market. Richard talked about his wife, Diane, and how the house still felt like it was built for two people instead of one, how he sometimes still set two coffee cups out of habit before catching himself. I talked, for the first time in longer than I could remember, about wanting things that didn't make practical sense, a version of myself that existed before schedules and responsibilities took over, before every hour of my day belonged to somebody else. That sounds exhausting, he said gently. It is, I admitted. We sat for nearly 2 hours, longer than either of us intended. And when the cafe started closing up around us, neither of us moved right away. When he finally asked if he could see me again, I felt my heart in my throat before I even answered. I said yes, knowing full well it wouldn't stay just coffee forever, not because either of us wanted to hurt anyone, but because something had quietly, undeniably started, the way a crack started in glass long before you notice it spreading. We met once more after that, at the same cafe, and this time he walked me to my car afterward. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't have to. Standing there in the parking lot with the wind pulling at his jacket, he asked me plainly, "Tell me what you're thinking." I told him the truth, that I'd spent my whole life doing what was expected of me, and that I was proud of it. Proud of my marriage, my children, the home we'd built, but that somewhere along the way I'd quietly stopped asking myself what I actually wanted. And that he was the first person in years to notice that before I did. He didn't smile. He just nodded, like he understood exactly what that admission had cost me. I need to go home, I told him. I need to figure out who I am again and what I'm willing to risk to feel like her. He didn't argue. He just stepped back and let me go, hands in his pockets, watching from the parking lot as I pulled away. That night, sitting across from Paul on our back porch while he talked about something at work I wasn't really listening to, I finally asked him a question I've been avoiding. Do you think I've changed? I asked since the kids left, since things got quiet. He thought about it, genuinely, the way he does everything. Maybe, he said, but so have I. We all do. I took his hand. Would you notice, I asked, if I disappeared a little? His grip tightened around mine. I'd notice, he said. I already do. For the first time in a long time, something passed between us that felt like the beginning of an answer, even if I didn't know yet what the question really was. I haven't seen Richard since. I don't know if I ever will again. But I think about that drive home more often than I probably should. Not because of him, but because of what he made me look at. I didn't dream about him that night. I thought instead about the woman I used to be, and whether there was still time to become her again, not somewhere else with someone else, but right here, in the life I'd already built, with the people who never stopped noticing me, even when I'd stopped noticing myself.